Jacob. I would like to thank CII Kerala for inviting me to share my thoughts on the family business. Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for initiating this. Uh, I would like to just share a little bit of a background of how accidentally I landed in the family business zone. I believe it was more of a karmic journey which landed me here. Way back in 97, 98. At that time, I did not knew the terrain of the concept of family business. Later, Indian business houses started to understand from the West when the very CII initiated bringing in the knowledge from the West around 98, 99, when John Ward was being brought to India by CII to educate them, educate Indian family business houses about the concept of how family businesses are extremely well structured, organized, uh, how you can, and how it has to be differently managed than a non-family business. So a lot of knowledge started coming. So being an early entrant into this space, I would call myself as a family business practitioner, and I had a good opportunity to work with different types of family businesses over a period of last 2 decades plus. Worked with about 100 plus families, small family to ultra large families all over the world. Not only worked with Indian families, of course, large part of my work is to work with Indian families within India and out of India, many Indians who have settled from their generations, and also to work with non-Indian families, English families, Arab families from other nations, which gave me a wide understanding of how a family business operates. So I thought of sharing few key insights what I have gathered over a period of my couple of decades of working with families and what I learned from them, which could be apt in any family business, for any family business, whether it is small in nature or whether it is large in nature. And one of the most beautiful thing about the family business is, as Mr. Jacob was sharing, that I personally believe the family is the foundation and cornerstone of any family business. If your family is not in order, if it is not structured, if it is not well curated, then your family business will not flourish or grow. So if while I was advising family businesses and working on family business area, I needed to go deep down to understand the construct of the family. And what I found, the family is the oldest institution in the world. And in India, historically, uh, of course, India is one of the oldest civilization, Indic civilization, and the concept of family is extremely prevalent and very strong. In fact, I would say that in different parts of the world, family as an institution is wavering and it is losing its gravitas. But when you look at India, the family is still a very strong and robust institution. We Indians put family first, then anything next. The concept of interdependency for an Indian family is very, very high. Whereas if I look at some other part of the world in the globe, the individualism and the concept of independence is very high, whereas we play it with the concept of interdependence. Going back, if I looked at the concept of the Varnashrama Dharma, of which was very prevalent from many, many thousands years back, one of the Varnas, which are called Vaishya Varnas, they were the custodians of family business in India. And in fact, they were the one. who were able to, it was running in their family to do business from generation to generation. Whatever the business father was doing, it was being done by the son. It was just getting passed on from generation to generation to generation. It was a very old tradition, and the succession was extremely seamless. And every child who was born in the Vaishya community probably had a natural propensity to have an entrepreneurial orientation, and they understood numbers, they understood trade, they understood business. That was the historical framework of Indian origin of family business in India from this Vaishya Varna. Today, whether you look at the Chettiars or Marwadis, Baniyas, Guptas, they were the Shettis in the West. They were the custodians of the very concept of family business in India. And probably once upon a time, it was 100% owned by families. Family business was the only business. As the evolution was taking place post independence, uh, some big business houses all were family businesses only before government came into some public sector undertaking and doing some businesses. Everything was family business. It the mushrooming at a big level, it took place after the economic liberalization, post economic liberalization in 92, when market opened up in a big way, and people, many family houses, business houses were able to mushroom in a very big way. Since then, if you notice, uh, all over the world, we have done a lot of research as part of our organization. World over, the family business accounts for about 75% on an average. Taking, in some countries it may be 80%, some it may be 85, some it may be 60. But by and large, I classify there are only two types of business in the world: family business and a non-family business. And as part of the non-family business, many multinationals, see, many of us think the multinationals are non-family business. You'll be surprised to know many of the multinationals are family business, extremely well-known family business. Whether it, yeah, Unilever is a family business. It was started by a family. So likewise, in those days, one member used to start, and they used to bring in their family into the system. That's how it mushroomed all over the world. Today, I find in India, approximately about 90% of the businesses are family business still, and only 10% account for a non-family business. So we live in a country where the backbone of the economy of this country is governed and driven by purely family business. So it's very naturally coming into the gene of Indian entrepreneurs to look at it from a family business lens, because it is very different. One thing which I found while working with family run businesses very uniquely, they are, any business, the purpose is to make profit. That's at a basic level. But what I find is that many of the business houses, especially family business houses, they bring something unique to the table called purpose. Purpose with profit. Now, their entire orientation is that what we put first, we bring the purpose first, and profit follows. If you have a lofty purpose, if you go and study many of the organizations, family business organizations in the world, they have a very clearly stated purpose in terms of what kind of an impact they want to create. If you look at many of the multi-generational family business in India, it is very essential to understand that they were able to craft the purpose first. And once they were able to craft the purpose, it was possible for them. They, most of the entrepreneurial family business houses, uh, A classic example is, let's take Tata. It's the what kind of an impact they are creating in the society. When Jamshedji established the Jamshedpur, the Tata Steel, he wanted to create a whole new society there. So the idea here was, at that given point of time, that what kind of a employment opportunity we can create, what kind of an economic growth we can create for the country. That was much before we got independence. And many of the traditional business houses, if you see whether it is a Bajaj family, which were there much before the mushrooming of many other large families, they always wanted to contribute back to the society in some or other way. So that was the origin. And this purpose, I find, is it keeps on evolving, and it transitions from a profit to impact. In fact, in America, uh, we came across through our research that today they have a very special an institution which certifies various organizations who are purpose driven. It's called B Corporations. bcorporation.net. You can go on Google and you can register, where they classify yourself as a purposeful organization. And if you are a purpose driven organization, it has a greatest linkage with ESG. And today, uh, if you are in a listed security space, whether it as a part of a family business or a non-family business, the maximum value is being given to you if you are ESG compliant business. If you are able to look at the sustainability and how much care you have for environment, etc. And if you have a very good governance, that's when you get the maximum valuation. So now, once upon a time, purpose was a philosophy. Today, the purpose has been, we are able to see how it converts into economics. Beautifully, the market organizations who truly believe in the purpose, who deliver the purpose with ESG, they get the maximum multiples in the market. That is where the construct of the family business is moving today. Now, depending on what kind of the family business sector you are in, depending on the size of your organization, and depending on the propensity and mindset of the family business promoters, what I found during my working, I found there are three kinds of family business models which do exist in the world. The first one, I call it as a owner manager model. The second one, I call it as a owner strategist model. The third one, I call it as an owner investor model. There are three types of unique models which do exist today. Predominantly, if you look at any developing countries or underdeveloped countries, the environment demands and requires the family business to be in an owner managerial space. Today, India is also not an exception. But if you look at any developed countries in Europe, in America, many of the businesses have transitioned to uh, uh, either a owner investor business model or a owner strategist business model. And there are very few and far who are still in an owner manager space. The one the only business in India which I find, a family business, which I find is in an owner investor space, is Tata Group. Apart from that, I can't find any business is in that space. But there are many other family businesses whom I find in an owner strategist space. Let me define a little bit more what exactly is the meaning of owner strategist. If you look at any of the corporations in the West, whom I call as an owner investor, they are pure shareholders, and all they receive is their dividends. And many a time they don't even know. All they carry is the second name. Take example of whether it is a Walt Disney or whether it is a Cargill or whether it is a Ford, whether it is any of the family business in the West, they have moved away from operations due to multiple reasons. Over a period of time, they decided to professionalize and ensure that the business grows much larger, faster than the family. That's when this kind of a scenario presents itself, where they are not able to control, manage. So they say, let's become an owner investor. As an owner strategist, they want to be uh, involved in all the strategic decisions, but allow the CEO and a professional team to run the business and delegate it as much as possible and involve themselves only in the areas where they are able to contribute to the strategy. And there are few businesses in India, whether you Mahindra and Mahindra or Murugappa Group, and there are few organizations in India who are pure family business have been able to transition towards a space where they have delegated all the uh, controls and functionalities to a professional CEO, and they are able to keep a distance. Now, if you look at rest of the businesses, they are purely, I call as owner manager driven businesses, whether small businesses or medium businesses, many large businesses also. There are few multi-billion dollar organizations in India who have become a multinational business, but they still want to run this business as an owner manager business. And they are the chairman, they are the managing director, they are the CEO, not only CEO, they are the COO. They go all the level to keep the control with them. They may have many fancy designation professionals with them, but how much they are able to delegate it to them, it becomes a big question. They don't want to delegate, either they don't trust them or they trust them, but they have a need to be involved in the system. But it's a choice. It's all the three models are good as long as any family business recognizes that what model you are operating in. But you cannot be in denial that I am doing something, but I'm assuming that I am an owner strategist, but I'm behaving like an owner manager. That's where the conflict starts coming in. The most important thing is here to understand how well we are able to curate our mindset. If the most important piece in family business is, do I have the capacity to let go of my power? Do I have a global thinking? What kind of an aspiration I have? Do I have the see in any family business you will find there are 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 family members who are working in the business. But is it possible for that number of people to ensure that they are able to be there present in every area? Not possible. You have to bring in other professional team members who will facilitate the growth. It purely depends on your aspiration, your risk taking ability, and depending on that, what kind of a mindset I need to develop. If they are going to fear, see, many people in India, they do not want to retire from the concept of retirement is very alien because they have never developed any alternate passion. They don't have any other passion apart from business. What happens, a big question comes, if I retire, what will I do? I have never developed any passion. I don't have an alternate occupation, and I do draw my identity from being part of my family business. If I don't have that designation, that association, then I wouldn't know how people will look at me, how people will perceive me. So this becomes a huge challenge for. So the mindset is extremely logged into the family business. So you will find many patriarchs, even at the age of 80, they are still sitting on the controlling seat, and their next generation would have already become 60, or they that is the nature of Indian family business. But most important thing is to find out, you know, do I have a mindset of custodianship? One key mindset is required is I am the custodian of this family business. That means I do not inherit this from my fathers and forefathers, but I borrow it from my next generation. That's the concept of custodianship. And if you look at the spiritual philosophy of our existence, we say, I own this land, I own this house, I own that. We are a, can you ever own a piece of earth? It is nature, it belongs to Mother Earth. We are a temporary custodian and we are delusional as if I own it. These are all the height of delusions. Similarly, in family business, people who are evolved spiritually, people who have a philosophical outlook, they understand that we are a temporary custodian. If I am a temporary custodian, how I am going to pass it on to the next custodian who is going to do justice to what they are doing. So developing this mindset of custodianship is extremely crucial. So when I look at the key tenets, key mantras in terms of what will ensure the success of family business to perpetuate from generation to generation, I thought of few key pillars which everybody can ponder upon, which where I have done a lot of work and lot of success we are able to achieve. The first one I would say is establishing a good family governance, extremely good family governance. I wouldn't even worry about the business governance first. I would worry about the family governance. What does it mean? It means essentially run your family like business, run your business like family. What does it mean? It means you should have structured forums in your family. You should have structured conversations. There has to be a family council. There has to be a family business council. There has to be an investment committee in the family who look at various softer and hard aspects, make all the decisions. There has to be an agenda. It is not a lunch table conversation or a dinner table conversation. This needs to be done beautifully in a very structured manner with a structured agenda, structured forum, structured quorum, with a decision making protocols. If we are not able to achieve a consensus, how are we going to make finalize a decision? There are many families I work with. At the family level, they say if we have not achieved consensus, we should try to influence each other and try to persuade. But if we have, there are good family governance example. They say that if even one person is not aligned, we should drop that subject, drop that decision, and we all need to learn to compromise. What is most important in family when we are setting up the governance is an ability to give in, not sit with one's ego, but say, look, I'm saying what I'm saying, but even one member is uncomfortable. I have failed to influence them. I have failed to educate them. I have failed to make them understand. That becomes the philosophy instead of blaming the family, because it is very easy to start blaming and shaming the family. So that's the first piece I would say. The second piece is having a professional mindset for the family business. What does it mean? That means, do we have the right person for the right job? Do we have a role clarity? Are we going to appoint the person with all the capabilities, or are we going to please the family members by appointing them in different positions? What kind of a leadership I'm bringing onto the table? Do we have adequate leadership? Many of the businesses die and the families get broken if you don't have a good leadership at a family level and also at a business level. It is very essential to have a great leadership in place and also a professional mindset, transitioning away from the master servant orientation. Many years back, if you look at India, The concept and the engagement of the family business with their teams were that I am the master, you are my servant. So do what I say. If you don't do what I say, then you don't have a place with me. That era has gone with people evolving, the knowledge economy which has come in. Today, it calls for a partnership between the family business promoters and the professionals. So, do I have the capacity to develop that partnership? Do I have a capacity to respect them? Do I have a capacity to do an inclusive decision making? That's what is most important factor to practice if one wants to perpetuate the family business from generation to generation. That I would call as a second pillar. The third one I would say is one of the biggest challenge which I have experienced working with multiple families is lack of clarity on wealth. The old Indian model of the wealth was don't keep any wealth outside the business. Any money, whatever you have, keep investing in the business. That was the model of the old Indian family business framework. At that time, it was partly influenced by the tax regime and structure what we had in India. Very, very high tax structure. If you look at 72, 73, 82, it was a very high tax slab. So therefore, people preferred to keep the wealth inside the business than taking it out. As the economy changed, policies changed. If you look at the Western family business model, they have beautifully segregated what is the business wealth, what is family wealth, and I go to the third extent called what is the personal wealth. There has to be a clear distinction. And what I have found in my experience, if you have good business family wealth security for the family, they are able to make a better decision in the business because they do not feel threatened. They feel their risk is not linked with the business risk and they are better entrepreneurs. So, hence, it is very essential to come up with a model where you, and it also is a good governance practice. In India, if we want to go to the next level of family business, and if you are a listed company or if you have any external investments which has come in from outsiders outside place, one thing which people look for is a good governance, and good governance means a very clear Lakshman Rekha between the business wealth, family wealth and personal wealth. Do not confuse and do not overlap. If that overlap is not going to be removed, people may think that we are benefiting in short run, but actually they are eroding the value of that family business. And long-term valuation is continuously challenged and questioned. So I find that dealing with money as a subject, whether it is a compensation for the family members, whether it is a dividend declaration for the family, and manage balancing the interest of working and non-working family members, people who are dependent on the dividends for survival and people who are working. So they are at the cross purpose. They want to keep on reinvesting the money, replowing the money back into the business versus families who are not working in the business, they are dependent on the dividend. So therefore, following a very fair process where you are able to incorporate all the stakeholders becomes extremely crucial. So this money matter needs to be dealt with caution, including I find many families run into trouble all over the world because we are not able to do a good compensation framework and structure. There are many families I can, due to confidentialities and the sensitivities of working with many families, I am not in a position to refer to the examples of many families, but I am trying to share with all of you what are the core issues which can make our mar family business. And money is one such topic. And this is a very, very sensitive topic in any family. So more transparent people are, more inclusive all the family business stakeholders are. It helps the family business to perpetuate to the next generation. And the fourth pillar of this continuity, I believe, is how well you are able to nurture the next generation. Do you have the capacity to build on good next generation leaders? Are you creating entrepreneurs in the family business or entitlers in the family business who are looking at entitlement? Or do you have difficulty to attract them, or they want to come and sit here because they are not able to get job outside, or they cannot create a new business? So it becomes a very, very challenging scenario. In next generation, some people who are not that capable, they may end up developing a privileged mindset. See, when you are born with a golden spoon and you are not a first generation entrepreneur, your entire mindset is very different. Your approach to life is very different. You have never struggled to put the food on table for yourself because all that has come naturally to you. However, if you are very calm, how do you break that? Is it a blessing or is it a curse? If you do not handle the golden spoon properly, it will become a curse. But if you are able to mix the purpose with this golden spoon, then you are able to create a legacy for your family business. There are a number of next generation great leaders who have come into business, uh, looking at what their father has done. They have taken the business to far better heights than what their father have done. There are many, many, many examples. Whether you look at the Bajaj, whether you look at Reliance, whether you look at, so all old family business houses, their father, whatever, whether it is JK's or Singhanias, number of old business family houses, Birla's, great example, Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla, he has outreached whatever his father was created, or whether it is Godrej. All these families are, for example, Tatas. They were able to, Mr. Ratan Tata was able to build many, many more businesses than what he received in legacy, and created a huge wealth, huge opportunity for the family and country at large. So it is very, very essential to marry the golden spoon with a lofty purpose. And all that can come only if you are able to make an investment in the next generation right from childhood. If you are assuming that you will be able to start to curate them when they finish their undergrad and postgrad, then we'll start teaching them, nothing will happen. You have to start coaching them, guiding them, mentoring them when they're 5 years old. They start looking at your family business. They must understand and should be privy to all the conversation. They should hear what is happening. Uh, the investment begins right at that stage. And curating their career path as to what do they want to do, what are their core strengths, how do we nurture them, how do we develop them, because they are the privileged kids, and these privileged kids with millennial mindset, it becomes very, very challenging to channelize their energy. And it is very essential, if one is looking for a growth and perpetuity, there has to be a huge investment in that area. And the last one I would like to talk about is the ownership and management succession model. I'm sure in the past last 5 sessions, some people would have touched upon the succession. So I will not go much deeper into this area, but I would like to say the succession is the biggest test for family continuity. How well you handle the succession will define whether the family business is still together or whether it's going to fall apart, and whether the meritocracy is going to succeed or hierarchy is going to succeed. Who is going to decide the succession? Is it going to be the previous generation is going to make a choice, or You are setting up a process through which the successor emerges. This is There is no one model which can fit any business. It has to be uniquely crafted, keeping their personalities, keeping the business size, and keeping the competencies required. And it is a process, and one needs to start worrying about it the day you become the chairman of the organization, or if you're the CEO of the organization. The first step I always advise all my clients and the families I work with, the first topic is, can we talk about succession? But the gentleman says, I'm only 45, I'm only 50. Why should I worry about it now? I said, no, that should be your first job description. That should be your first KRA. Can we talk about it? In terms of how are you thinking? That will define the perpetuity. God bless you with 80 years. But can we look at the framework, how it's going to evolve, create the entire mechanics and put it in place. And when the times to come, it will play itself. But with my experience, what I find, more about 90% of the family businesses in India, unfortunately, don't look at the succession process very actively. Unfortunately, most of the cases, it ends up at a contingency succession. It's not a planned and structured succession. So that throws a huge challenge when you are trying to do something in a hurry without having a full clarity. And at that time, succession is a event which creates the maximum emotions. And as I was explaining, the first pillar, its most important thing is to ensure that there has to be an inclusiveness and a great communication. How much ever you are able to invest in family, you will be able to reap the your benefits in the business. It's equally opposing energy. So you invest in family, you will get the benefits in business. You invest in family business area, the family will benefit. It feeds on to each other in a beautiful manner. And I believe in future, the family business is the only institution which is so robust, which will fight any kind of crisis, which will fight any kind of situation where they will bounce back, because the entrepreneurialism is in their blood. And it is so, and that is the future. There have been loads of research done by the Western organization that family businesses outperform a non-family business, numbers wise, valuation wise, turnover wise, GDP contribution wise. There is enough data available, one can Google. It shows the importance and significance of family business in terms of how they actually a very precious institution one needs to nurture, protect, and build, that no pandemic can shake them in any way, because their family is still together. One of the great benefits of this pandemic, even though it has thrown the businesses into a huge challenge, it has brought the family together. They're all staying together. They're all eating together. I have a old Vedic adage I talk about: a family which eats together, prays together, and holidays together, they can fight any problem. They can come up and come out from any challenge whatsoever. So, and a family which lives together. So this pandemic has stopped all the travels where families are living together, forced to live together. Families are able to spend quality time with each other. The family communication has gone up. And many families I work with, they're able to understand and appreciate their family much better. They value them. So this is a great, we should always, family business have a unique advantage to look at every opportunity in every crisis. So I believe that especially Indian family businesses are so deeply grounded in values that they can bounce back and they will find a new path. All they need to have a full clarity is what is the purpose of our family business and how much respect we give to our family and family members. That is the most crucial thing. And these are all some of my experiences I wanted to share with all of you. Happy to take any question, Mr. Jacob. Uh, I think
Thank you so much, sir,
I
for
have
that.
overshot on the time.
No, no, no. You're perfectly on time. Thank you so much for that very enlightening session. We have a question, but I would just frame it a little differently. It is asked by Prashant. He talks about where the issues start. I would say, I would rather twist the question and say, uh, where do family business problems start? Does it start at the boardroom or does it start at home? And what do you have to say?
It starts at the home, sir. Because fundamentally, I believe if you are not able to manage the relationships at the boardroom, it's only a reflection. The challenge starts in an inability to nurture a relationship what we have. The family relationships, I call them as essential relationships, and it calls for a lot of investment. And unfortunately, everybody all over the world, we take family members for granted. So therefore, we don't make enough investment in our spouses and our children. And when the problems starts to mushroom, that's when we recognize. So sometimes it becomes too late. So it starts at home very clearly.
Thank you so much. So you spoke about the purpose of a family business, and you spoke about how most family businesses start with a purpose, which is more to do about social impact, and profit is only a byproduct that you're looking at. Initially, that's how it starts.
Correct.
And then it starts getting professionalized. Then they're talking about impact. And then somewhere along the lines, money starts becoming a purpose.
Correct.
What do you have to say to that transition in many of the businesses today?
See, very important thing to understand that if your family business is not able to nurture and nourish the financial needs of the family, then you are still struggling at a survival level. That means your business has not grown beyond a survival to growth and a maturity stages. Like there are different stages any business, including a family business, goes through. So Vivekananda ji says that don't teach meditation to a beggar, give him bread first. So if you are not able to fulfill the basics, look at your business management skills, your entrepreneurial skills. And if you are able to set that right first, then rest starts coming in.
What are your thoughts on? I think many times we say that history is very important to take us forward. And a lot of family businesses have not documented the history of the business, how it has started, the generation, how is this transition from what it was. What do you think is the importance of documenting a history of the family business?
So let me just share my insights and I will also share my learning a little bit. I had a privilege and blessings of reading many Indian scriptures, including Vedas. And all my learnings were passed on from oral tradition. So India is very, very rich in oral tradition, and we do not have the culture of documentation. The concept of documentation came from the West, and I believe the need for such documentation came because there was a trust deficit, and there was also a memory challenge. If you look at older Indians, we had a capacity to remember anything and everything. Before I possessed a mobile in my hand, I used to remember about 1,200 mobile numbers in my memory. I am so ashamed to say today, thanks to this mobile phone, all the numbers except my wife and my family, I don't remember any number. So the problem of this documentation came in, I believe, because of two reasons. India as a culture, we are an oral tradition culture. And the oral tradition was passed on. I worked with a very large food manufacturing company, and their all their products had a very unique taste, and nobody could compete with them. I asked the founders and the next generation family members, what is the secret? Where is it documented? They said that we have documented everything, but for one close last recipe, which is being passed on from oral tradition. We do not want to write down anywhere. It will get copied. Tomorrow, PepsiCo will produce the same thing. But this is our copyright from the village, which my great grandfather invented that masala, and we do not want to write it down anywhere. So I believe, is it important? Uh, yes, because we have lost the oral tradition. That becomes a challenge. We don't talk as much as we need to talk to our children about what my father was, what my grandfather was, what their business was, because the millennials, they may not be even interested in knowing what my father and grandfather did. So that becomes a challenge. But yes, the requirement of data to capture somewhere, if not in mind, it has to be captured in paper. Because one unique thing about family business is that there's a pattern in family business. If you have gone through any separation in your previous generation or previous to previous generation, you have a propensity to go through a separation in the future. So the future mirrors the past. If there has been a distrusting culture in your family, that mirrors in the future. So there is a pattern which follows. So from that point of view, yes, the documentation is crucial, either in your mind or in paper.
You spoke about trust. I think trust as a center of everything. Lack of trust leads us to micromanage because you're not willing to let go.
Correct.
And in many organizations, in family business and otherwise, it is that lack of trust which makes us micromanage to the last level. This micromanagement actually impedes growth, and it also impedes transition from generation to generation, because once you build lack of trust as the foundation stone of the business, everything goes in that manner. What do you think, or what are the solutions that you've come by in your experience, which has actually enabled the family business owners to think beyond and get over the trust deficit that they have?
So I would like to just break the trust into two types of trust. There is a competence trust and there is a vulnerability trust. Many family businesses, when they look at their next generation, because they have seen them right from childhood, they are not able to recognize their competence because they have seen them make all mistakes since they have been babies. And all they are used to is having a parent to child relationship. They were, even though my child has grown up, he has gone to best of the schools and colleges, is extremely capable, but in my mind, he is still a child. So I'm not able to recognize the competence in them. So the first step is to identify if there is a competence deficit in the next generation. If there is no competence deficit, helping them to build that visibility is very easy if an outsider is able to pinpoint. And if the previous generation members are being coached, are ready to get coached to receive some feedback. Because the biggest challenge I find, people do not want, everybody has a blind spot and they may not able to appreciate and receive feedback. So through proper feedback mechanism, it is possible to educate them. The core challenge is, more than the competence trust, is the vulnerability trust. If I'm not able to trust my family members in ethics, values, culture, core existence in the softer aspect, that becomes a challenge. That that is a reflection of, if I'm not able to trust the other person, I'm not able to trust myself. If I'm not able to trust myself, that means I'm very, very insecure. If I'm very insecure, I need to do something about myself. And most of the family members may not be able to own I'm very insecure. And unless they learn to own their problems, they will never be wanting to change. So you can never change them. The step one for change is, do I have a capacity to own what my challenge is? So in different families, the breaking the trust deficit, one needs to figure it out. What is in the core of that family where that is originating from? So that's how I go about solving it.
I would just take it as, since we're talking about business transitioning from generation to generation. In today's scenario, you see a lot of the next generation of the family business going outside, getting educated, having a very forward thinking mindset. Probably the earlier generation has a very traditional mindset. And sometimes those mindsets don't match, wherein the traditional business owner has a very traditional approach to how this family or the business should be. And you spoke about the thing to let go. There's no retirement. So the patriarch is always there. And then you have the younger generation coming in, and the younger generation doesn't have the opportunity to actually do something. So sometimes, even though they come with a lot of ideas to grow the business, that transitions into entitlement because they're not able to do anything. What do you have to say for that?
See, if the next generation who come in and they are not able, and they are extremely good, they have great ideas, they have competence, they should see. One of the biggest leadership skills, which I believe in today's world, is an ability to influence. That means if they are not able to influence their patriarch, I will look at them, but there is something lacking in them. Why you are not able to influence your patriarch if you are so smart, you are so intelligent? Okay, unless you say I tried my level best, but it is beyond me. Okay, that's also possible. In that, and I do not want to rupture my relationship at the cost of pushing beyond a point. Then they have a choice to make in their life. They can always be an entrepreneur. Go out and prove yourself. You don't have to be part and parcel of this journey, and do it in such a way that it does not disturb the family fabric. Do it respectfully. Go out. Do. The world is very large. The Today there are many startups. So I think the true competence finds its own way. They are like water. If you pour them, they will find their way.
I would ask one last question due to the time paucity, and that again I would bring to something you mentioned on an anchor.
Okay.
Importance of an anchor in a family business or in any business for that matter. And that anchor could be different in the family business and it could be different in the family. Or would it be the same? So, what is your take on that, given the various family businesses that you've spoken to?
See, I have come across there are three types of leaders. Let me use the word called leaders. So there are family leaders, and there are business leaders, and there are integrated leaders. The best choice and option is obviously an integrated leader who has a visibility and capacity to balance the needs of family and business both. Whereas if in your family business you have two different types of leaders, there's a family leader and there's a business leader, they must develop a camaraderie to accommodate each other and take each other's inputs without harming the business, without harming the family. How we can come up with a curated solution? The biggest challenge comes if you don't have a business leader, the business goes down. Only good family leader, family is okay, business goes down. You have a good business leader, no family leader, family goes down, in turn business goes down. So therefore, identifying and building on this family leader, it need not be number one person has to be the leader. It need not be hierarchy. It can be anybody who can pick up the thread and become a servant leader also. So that becomes very, very crucial.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time. If I could summarize and probably look at the key mantras that you've spoken about, I think one would be, how do we family business transition from an owner managed to an owner investor business? And I think that transition is something which you really laid emphasis on. And you were saying, how do we do this? I think the second part of what you spoke about is also in terms of coaching. The importance of coaching for the next generation, formally and very informally, during your normal lifestyle also, so that they inculcate the skills and the values that the family has. But I think what I took away most is probably what you said, that a family that eats together, prays together, lives together, holidays together, stays together. And once a family does stay together, that is in the interest of the business, and the business starts growing. Thank you so much. So I have so many questions that I have personally written down, but paucity of time, and I wouldn't want to get into Mr. Kumar's time, which he has to actually abridge all the sessions of the previous 5 weeks. So thank you so much for your time. Good evening.
Thank you so much. Appreciate. Thank you. Namaste.